morning, everyone. Good morning, NDC. I'm excited to be speaking here today. I see you brought food. That's really good. It's a long talk, so that's perfect. I'm going to talk about the evolution of the Remix framework and provide a guide on how to build performant and resilient apps with it. So, how many of you have used Remix? Not so many. What about React Router? OK, we're going to see why that matters later. So first, who am I? My name is Aurora. I'm from here in Norway, and I work as a consultant at Crayon Consulting in Oslo, or here. And we have a booth at NDC, so check us out later. We also have a game made by our consultants. And I'm currently hired on a project for Miljødirektoratet, which also have a booth here today. I'm a Microsoft MVP in web dev, and I'm actively using Next.js in my current project, but I also do Remix on the side. So let's get right to the topic, which is Remix. So Remix is a React-based full-stack web framework or meta framework. And a meta framework is a framework around another framework. So in this case, it's React. Remix is one of the biggest React meta frameworks alongside Next, but it's lesser known. And if you want to get a quick overview of its main selling points, scrolling through the website is a really nice experience and sells the key features of the framework, like nested layouts, form actions, server-side loaders, and error boundaries. So check this out. Remix was released in 2020 and acquired by Shopify in 2022. And it's very easy to get into it and start building apps in a way that feels native to the web. So Remix aims to allow you to focus on the user interface and work back through web standards to deliver a fast and resilient user experience. Remix presented solutions to problems that were not yet solved at the time. So now, a lot of these features have actually appeared in React 19 in different variations, so they were really good solutions back then. For example, their approach to nested routing. So it was quite impactful when it came out. It's the idea of coupling segments of the URL to component hierarchy and data. And the nested routing system was inspired by the routing system in Ember.js in 2014, where the team there realized that in almost every case, segments of the URL determine the layouts to render on the page and the data dependencies of that. Remix is actually made by the same people who created and maintain React Router, which is a library that most of us, as we've seen, have used in our career. Remix uses React Router as its biggest dependency after React itself. So let's talk a bit more about React Router. So for 10 years, React Router has remained one of the most widely used dependencies in the React ecosystem. And that's clear just by looking at the number of public repositories using React Router, which is 10.7 million, which is it's growing really fast. When I did this talk like last year, I think, it was at 7.1, and I was like, wait, I have to update this number. And it was at 10.7 now, so it's a lot. It's increasing rapidly. And Shopify also uses React Router. They have a 5 million line application running on React Router, which is the core of their business. So that's just one example. So React Router is great, but the team wanted to provide more features to allow developers to build better websites with React and scale. For example, we want features like automatic code splitting, simplified data loading, form actions, simplified pending states, and optimistic UI, and also server rendering. And these features are commonly found in meta frameworks like Next.js. So that's why Remix was created. Another piece of the story is Vite. Do you know Vite? Who knows Vite? Great. So Vite is a front-end tool that provides optimized builds and faster dev experience. It has a rich plugin ecosystem and an API that can be easily used to integrate seamlessly with frameworks. It was created for Vue.js, but it's now used by like almost every framework, for example, Svelte and Astro. And it's risen a lot in popularity in the past and replaced, long ago, Create React App as the most popular and recommended way to make a React app. And actually, Create React App became, it was already unmaintained, but it just got deprecated recently. So yeah, even more relevant now. Vite is really just amazing to use as a developer. It continues to amaze us with how much it can handle. So here from Blue Sky, Ben Holmes is saying how he was surprised even now that Vite can handle switching between different branches, fixing merge conflicts, and installing dependencies. And people are not used to this. In Webpack, it was not like this. And then, in 2023, Remix decided to join in and switch to Vite. And this allowed them to improve and extend the capabilities of Remix and opened up Remix to even more users. They also added new features like spa mode for client-only apps. And as a developer, this just meant switching to a Vite config and enabling a plugin. So this was a big step already. So then there was this, React Router plus a Vite plugin. And the Remix team still wanted to convince more developers using React Router to switch to Remix for all of the great features, like the code splitting, form actions, optimistic UI, etc. But usually, migrating to a new framework is not an option in the real world. So what they realized is that the gap between React Router and Remix was actually very small. Remix was just React Router and the Vite plugin. So why not go the other way around and start from the router? So all of this led up to ReactConf 2024, where the creator of React Router, Ryan Florence, announced the future of Remix. It would continue as React Router v7. The team wanted that 5 million line Shopify app, those 10 million plus React Router projects on GitHub, and everyone else to be able to easily upgrade and take advantage of the latest and greatest that React had to offer. They wanted creating a new React app to be easy and scalable. And for years, the features of Remix had already been put into React Router anyway, until this point where they merged. React Router v7 opens a lot of possibilities for developers. It actually allows us to adopt a meta framework and its features without rebuilding. So that's really the incredible part here. So to summarize, you came here to learn about Remix, an innovative meta framework for React. And you might have thought React Router is just React Router. Well, not anymore. React Router is now also a full stack framework, including all of Remix's features. And this talk is now about React Router, so welcome. The merge of React Router and Remix is also especially important now that Create React App is deprecated. So we have to migrate away. I hope you're not still using it. And React Router v7 is actually one of the recommended ways to migrate away from, for example, Create React App. This is from the docs. It's a lot easier than, for example, Next.js, where you're pretty close to rewriting your whole app. So that's why this is like one of the most important things for real apps to even have a shot at doing a migration to a framework, which is why React Router v7 is so significant. And in addition, you can slowly and incrementally adopt more features based on your needs. Because as a result of the merge of React Router and Remix, React Router now has different modes. So there's 3 primary ways or modes to use it in an app. The features available in each mode are additive, so moving from the declarative to the data to the framework mode adds more features at the cost of architecture control. So you can pick your mode based on how much control or how much help you want from React Router. Declarative mode is the one you're probably the most familiar with when using React Router in a single-page application. It enables the basic routing features with browser router component, route, all of that, matching URLs to components, navigating around the app, and providing active states with APIs like navlink, use navigate, use location, those things. So familiar stuff. Then, if you move on to, if you move your route configuration outside of React rendering, you have data mode, which adds loading states or data loading, actions, pending states, and more with the APIs loader, action, and use fetcher. And there's more APIs as well. And then finally, the framework mode is wrapped with a Vite plugin, which provides the full React Router full stack experience, basically everything that Remix had, like intelligent code splitting, SSR, and there's also some new stuff in React Router v7, like type-safe route modules, and there's an href utility, which we're going to see later, and they also added static rendering, which they didn't have before. So there's actually 3 rendering strategies now in React Router: client-side rendering, server-side rendering, and static pre-rendering. And you can configure them in a config file. So routes are always client-side rendered as the user navigates around the app And if you're looking to build a single-page app, you can disable server-side rendering by setting it to false. And this is the typical client-side rendering where you manipulate the browser history stack and without making the full page reload. So basic React Router. You can also use server-side rendering, which you just set SSR to true. And then they added this pre-rendering. So that means at build time, creating the HTML statically. And that's useful for SEO and performance, especially if you have a deployment without server rendering. Let's move on to the architecture of Remix, or now React Router v7. And this will be in framework mode, because this is where all of this server stuff is relevant. And I wish there was a shorter name. I'm going to have to say this a lot now. And I'm going to be focusing all the features from the framework mode, because this was unique to Remix and is what allows us to make these performant and resilient applications. And after I've done all the technical stuff, I'm going to do a live demo, so you will kind of reinforce the background here. So in framework mode, React Router is 4 things: a compiler, a server-side HTTP handler, a server framework, and then also a browser framework. And everything starts with a compiler with React Router build. So using Vite, this creates a few things: a server HTTP handler, which includes all of the route modules together to be able to render on the server and handle any server-side requests. Then a browser build. And this includes automatic code splitting by route and anything needed to run an application in the browser. And there's also an asset manifest. So this is used both on the client and on the server to know the entire dependency graph of the application. It's being used, for example, to preload resources. So this is all you need with these build artifacts to deploy to any hosting service that runs JavaScript. So while React Router runs on the server, it's not actually a server. It's just a handler that is given to the server. And it's built on the Web Fetch API instead of Node.js. And this enables React Router to run in any Node.js server like Vercel, Netlify, or non-Node.js environments like Cloudflare Workers or Deno Deploy. And this is what React Router looks like when running in an Express app. This code is actually from these template apps that React Router has on their GitHub to help you set up for different deployments. So I just paste the code there. So here, Express or Node.js is the actual server, where React Router is just a handler on that server. And the package at the top there, React Router Express, is called an adapter. React Router handlers are server agnostic, and then the adapter is what makes them work for a specific server. By converting the server request into the Fetch API on the way in, and then adapting the fetch response coming from React Router into the server's response API. So that's what allows you to deploy React Router anywhere. If you're familiar with server-side MVC web frameworks like Rails or Laravel, React Router in framework mode is the view and the controller, but it leaves the model up to you. And most server-side frameworks are model-focused, where a controller manages multiple URLs for a single model, where React Router is UI-focused. Routes can handle an entire URL or just a segment of the URL. And instead of having a split between the view and the controller, this thing called route modules take on both responsibilities. And route modules are the foundation of the React Router framework. They define everything from automatic code splitting to data loading, actions, revalidation, error boundaries, everything. Route modules have 3 primary exports: a loader, an action, and a default, which is the component. So more often than not, Remix route modules can contain both the UI and the interaction with the model in the same file. So which makes it really a really good developer experience when you're building apps. And you can actually use Remix as just a server-side, or React Router v7, as just a server-side framework without any browser JavaScript at all. Because the route conventions for data loading, it's using loaders, mutations with actions and a form, and components that render at a URL, which is just the core set for a lot of web projects. Let's look at an example of a remix React Router v7 route module, which is called here Nodes TSX. This is going to be some simplified code examples from the demo later. We can pretend we have a list of nodes and a form to add a node. The form can also display validation errors. This route module has 3 exports: a loader, a default, which is the component, and an action. Route files can export a loader function that provides data to the route component on GET requests. So when the user navigates to a matching route, the data is first loaded and then the page is rendered. And these loaders only run on the server. Since loaders only run on the server, we can, in this Nodes TSX route module, simply query the database through an ORM here and find many nodes and return them. The default export of the route file or route module is the component that renders on the route. And it runs first on the server during SSR and then on the client again. And is hydrated on the client. So when the component is rendered, it is provided with some props. The most important are loader data, which is the data returned from the loader that ran on the server, and action data, the data returned from the action function for the module. And it also gets some params, which is just an object with the route params, and matches, which is an array of all the matches in the current route tree. So in this example, we are mapping the nodes from the database to links, and then rendering a form with inputs. And we can use a past action data prop to map potential errors to error messages. And we can submit to the action on the route with the form. And then the action data is the return of the action. So everything is happening in the same route module here. And the actions only run on the server as well. And you can handle post, put, patch, and delete through the action. And even return data, as we saw in the example. So when the form is submitted to for a route module, the action that is matching the form's action attribute, default HTML form standard there, it's being called. So in the example again here, the action is receiving a request from the component. The values in the form fields will be available on the standard form data API. So all of this just using web standard. And then using the form data get to get the field name, specific field from the form. And then you can validate or return errors based on that on the server. So one of the primary features of the React Router framework is the way it automatically keeps your UI in sync with persistent state. And this happens in 3 steps. So first, the route loaders provide data to the UI. Then the forms post data to route actions that update persistent state, for example, in the database. And then finally, the loader data on the page is automatically revalidated. So you can think of route modules as React components that are already their own API route, and they already know how to load and submit data to themselves on the server. So React Router leverages also its nested routing system to optimize load time. So here's a different example where we have 2 route modules in one page. And when a URL matches multiple routes, React Router can load these in parallel, avoiding any request waterfalls. A route module can also export other special functions. So a meta export allows you to add metadata, HTML tags for every route in your app. And these tags are important for SEO, search engine optimization. Then there's also a links function, which defines which link elements to add to the page. For example, you can use them for style sheets. And there is an error boundary export that can catch and render UI for errors. So this is, again, all the features of a single route module. And recently in V7, they have added also client-only versions of the loaders called client action and client loader. But today we're going to focus on the server framework. So in this way, React Router in framework mode scales down. Because not every page in your application needs a bunch of JavaScript. And not every user interaction requires any more stuff than just the browser default behavior. So you can build things in React Router the simple way first. and then scale up later without changing the fundamental model. And this means that the majority of React Router apps built this way work without JavaScript in the browser. So before JavaScript has even hydrated the page there. And that's what makes it very resilient to bad network conditions, for example. So once React Router has served the document to the browser, it will then hydrate the page with the browser builds JavaScript modules. And the process of hydration is an important step in server-side rendered JavaScript applications. This is what makes the HTML interactive, clickable. It's kind of like watering a dry HTML with water of interactivity and event handlers. So this is now the browser framework part of React Router working. So when the user clicks a link, instead of making a round trip to the server for the entire document, React Router just does a client-side navigation, fetches the data, and updates the UI. And this means that we don't need to re-download assets, and we don't need to parse them again in the browser. And the data fetch is a lot smaller than the entire document. And because React Router enhances the HTML APIs like anchor and form, your app tends to work before JavaScript is loaded in on the page, just by using React Router in its intended way. And there's some built-in optimizations for client-side navigation. So React Router knows which layouts will persist between the two URLs. It only fetches data for the ones that need to be refetched. Whereas a full document request would require all the data to be refetched again, which would waste a lot of resources and slow down your app. And React Router can prefetch resources when the user is about to click, for example, hovering a link. And this is because we have this asset manifest from the compiler. And then React Router provides you with additional client-side APIs. So you can create richer user experiences without changing the fundamental model that you built on the server framework part of React Router. So in this first route module, we can make some very small and useful UX improvements to this form that we can only do with JavaScript in the browser. For example, disable a button when the form is being submitted, or focus the input if server-side validation fails, or do something like fade in error messages. Could be anything. Anything that you need JS in the browser to do. And here's an example of what that could look like. So the highlighted parts here are the browser framework working on top of the server framework. So we have the browser framework exposed as hooks and components. Here is the hook use navigation. So this is an important part of the browser framework of React Router. We can add a busy variable based on the state of the navigation, add a ref, focus the ref with an effect, use the busy variable to disable the button, add the fading component. And what's interesting about this code is that it's only additive. So the entire interaction is still the same fundamental thing. And it even works at a basic level without JavaScript. The only difference is the user feedback is now provided by the browser framework instead of the browser itself. For example, with the spinning favicon that is not great for UX. So because Remix reaches into the controller level of the backend, it can do this seamlessly. And while it doesn't reach as far back into the stack as server-side frameworks like Rails and Laravel, it does reach a lot farther into the browser to make the transition from the backend to the browser or to the frontend seamless. So, for example, if you were to build a plain HTML form and server-side handler in a backend heavy web framework, it would probably be just as easy as in React Router. But as soon as you want to then cross over into an experience with animated validation messages, focus management, pending UI, that might require a big change in the code. So in React Router, you just add some code around the existing framework or the existing server-side view without changing how it works fundamentally. And the Remix team borrowed an old term called progressive enhancement to explain this. You can start small with a plain HTML form. And since React Router scales down, that's why, or you can do this because React Router scales down to the server. And then you scale the UI up later when you have the time or ambition to do that, after everything is already working. So that's how React Router works, and we're going to start pretty soon coding it for ourselves. So first, this is how you would create a React Router v7 app now. So it has a create command, and the top command is the whole framework mode, which is, but if you're using data mode or declarative mode, you can just make a Vite app and then install React Router. That's like the normal React Router, right? That you already know. But framework mode is what we're going to be focusing on now. So in framework mode, we get some things here in the editor. So the app directory is for all React Router app code. And then you'll see the root TSX, which is the root route module. And this is the required, or the only required route module, which is the parent to all other routes and is in charge of rendering the root HTML document. Then we have this file, routes.ts, which is where you initiate your routes or route modules. And this can be set to a config-based approach using code or a file-based approach. And in Remix, the only option here was a file-based approach. But now in React Router v7, they changed it to a code-based approach, which is a lot more customizable. So yeah, that's the recommended way now with a code-based approach, which has its pros and cons, of course. Then we have the routes directory, and if you set this to file-based routing, you need to use that naming and put the file-based convention files there, like in other meta frameworks. But since we're using code-based, we can just restructure this, name it whatever, define our own routing system. And then here is the React Router config. So this is where we define the rendering strategy that we want to use. That I showed earlier. So you can turn off SSR and be in SPA mode, leave it on, and add static pre-rendered pages if you want to do that. And another interesting folder here is the .react router at the top there. So this folder is also new in v7. It's containing auto-generated types. So have you ever experienced like refactoring something and then in the route, and then you have to change a lot of URLs all over the app and you don't know where? And something might break. Yeah, so this solves that problem. So we have types for all of our routes. Also see this later. And the Vite config is also here at the bottom. So by default, React Router in framework mode handles generating the HTTP response and then also hydrating the app on the client for you. But if you want to override it or change this behavior, there's a specific command, React Router reveal, which will reveal these files that are hidden initially, where you can read the code that's being run, entry server TSX, which is server-side code, entry client TSX, which is client-side code, being run by React Router. The entry server TSX is the first bit of JavaScript that runs when the request hits your server. So React Router handles loading all the data, and you're responsible for sending back the response. And this file uses the React, or this file renders our React app to a string or stream, because it features also streaming, and then sends that as a response to the client. And the entry client is the first bit of JavaScript that runs when the app loads in the browser. So this is where we hydrate the React components. So this module uses the React DOM hydrate root, which you might be familiar with, that hydrates the markup that we already generated on the server in the server entry module. So as you can see here, React Router doesn't try to hide from you what's happening behind the scenes. It just gives you full freedom to change it if you want to, which makes it very different from other meta frameworks like Next.js, where you have to follow their rules, their convention, their file-based routing system, everything. So React Router is very flexible in that way. OK, I'm going to move now to a demo of a real application. And it will focus on utilizing the full stack framework, part of React Router, like the server features, which is basically showcasing what was originally Remix. But you don't have to use any of the server stuff. You can just use all the client features of React Router if you want to. So I'm going to move to an app here. I don't want to be on this route. That's my bad. Supposed to be here. Okay, good. Yeah. So this is a sort of a half-completed application. It's using React Router v7. Let's just review what's here and then complete this. I'm using, by the way, Tailwind v4, Prisma as my ORM, and Prisma Postgres as my database. So it's using a real database. And first, let's just review the files here that we already learned about. So the Vite config is defining the React Router plugin. The React Router config is setting SSR to true. And I'm also pre-rendering this page here because there's no data here. Normal things, ESLint, and then this .react router, or we can open the app folder also. We can see the .react router auto-generated types, and this routes TS file, which is where we define our route modules. So this is new in v7 again. And this is now defining an index route, which you're currently seeing, home, TSX, the first route module underneath the root. Oh, by the way, also the root module, we already saw this, but returning the document, and it has this special layout with the outlet for all the other routes. And it also has this error boundary, so this is something you can use for all route modules. This is actually the default error boundary, and that lets us, for example, render specific UI for certain errors. So for example, the 404 here is rendering a nice 404 UI. Okay, what about the home TSX here? So right away you'll see the squiggly. This is a good thing. It means that this href utility, which is checking whether my string is corresponding to the types that have been generated based on what I've defined in the config. So this is, again, new in v7, type safety, making sure you don't try to go to URLs that don't exist yet. So the notes is red, that's correct, because it doesn't exist here yet. And this route module has some metadata, so that's what's giving me this title of the document, the meta export. And then it has a link, so this is a client-side thing. It's enhanced. It's an anchor tag that has been enhanced with client-side navigation. This is also a React Router component. So we can actually add this route because it's giving us 404, right? So I'll do that in the routes TS. And we'll add another route, which is going to be just notes, notes TSX, like that. And that's the file that is here. So I'm just linking the file to the route config. And now the error here has disappeared because it's a valid route, which is nice. And I can see it here on the screen. And in this file here, just going to go through this. This is a route module. It has also metadata. And it's just contains a list of nodes that is empty and is mapping those to links. So we'll see this in a sec. But currently, it's empty. So what I'm going to do here is fetch data. And I would do that with a loader. So server-side loader, and then we can get nodes from through Prisma, through my database, and find many, maybe order it by when it was created, return it. That's all good. So this will now access the database on the server, and then give this as props to the component, so we can get the loader data here. And again, we can use this auto-generated types. So you see I have this types from notes. This is the correct one for this route. And that gives me types on the loader data. So I can replace this here and just get the notes from that. So now I have type safety across the server boundary here. There we go. Let's see if it works. Oh, yeah? Not yet. There we go. So now I loaded the data on the server, and the component can receive it and just display it as links here. Now, what if I wanted to persist this component and show something else while navigating through it? Well, that means that this should probably be a layout so that it will be shared across all the subroutes. So instead of making this a route, we'll make it into a layout. React Router layout. Layouts don't have any route. They're just like a container. And they receive a list of routes. I'm going to use this prefix utility here and call it notes. So that's what we already had. And then again, a new list. Sorry, I'm going to close this. It's annoying. I've done this before. OK, whatever. And then we will do here an index route. So that's the default subpage for that layout. And here we'll just do a random node. There we go. Add some stuff here. See if it's going to work. So currently, it's not appearing. And the reason is because layouts need to define an outlet, which is where they're going to render their child routes. Let's see if we can make it work. So here, I'm just going to put an outlet at the bottom here, like that. And yeah, so now we were able to show this index route, which is the random node file, linked inside the config, and all is well. And random node, let's check it out. It's using also a loader, as we just saw earlier, to get a random node from the database. So if I refresh the page, it's going to give me a new one. And it also has, well, it's actually throwing a 404 here, which is being caught by an error boundary. So route modules can have their own error boundary. And let's say it will now throw a response if no random node, right? So let's just try to set this to undefined. Undefined. See what happens. So now this error boundary actually caught the 404 and gave us this custom error UI. So that's how those work. What else? Maybe we should make this create button work. So it's currently going to a 404. You can also see that it's invalid in this file here. There's no route nodes new yet. Let's make that as well. So I'll go back to the route config and add now a relative route. So we'll do new, nodes new. And now we have this other relative route, which is not the index. So index is under notes, and then we add another route, new. And let's check it out also. This is not containing a lot of things right now. It's a form using the capital F form, which is a component from React Router, which enhances the native form with client-side navigation as well. So it doesn't do like a full page reload. And what's going to happen when I click this? Well, I'm going to get an app error, method not allowed. And the reason for that is because I'm trying to do a post, but there is no action defined on this route. So it's giving me method not allowed. And one thing I can do is avoid a full app error by making an error boundary. So we'll add an error boundary here. Just do like error message, something like that. And then we will be able to at least catch it. If something goes wrong in the submission, we don't have to break the whole app. But actually, I still want to make the form work. So I'm going to export an action as well here. And an action takes in a request. And this can be typed with, again, route, action args. So this is, again, from those types that are being generated. We can get the form data from the request, get the title, get the content using the form data API. And then we can insert it into the database. Let's not use exactly this. This is OK. Like that. I'm going to import Prisma here and type these as strings right now. That's fine. There we go. And I need this squiggly here. OK. And when I submit this, let's try it out. it appeared, didn't it? Yeah. So it's at the top here. And I didn't actually have to like push this to a list and spread, the React operations. It's just automatically revalidated everything for me and appeared in the list. We can do another one just to make sure it's the new one. Right? So it just reran that loader for me. I didn't have to do anything. This is, again, one of the main features of the way React Router works. And that's all good. Maybe we want to also validate this on the server. So I can get a validation result. Let's do node schema. And this is using Zod to check for a specific length, so we don't submit empty nodes. And do a safe parse here and just parse those values from the form data. Use this safe values. And then if it didn't work, we can return some errors. So I actually want to return the specific field errors and display them inside the form. So I'll do the result, error, form error, field. This is really long. Field errors, there we go. There we go. And then also, let's get the node that was created and do a redirect to this node. So React Router redirect using the href utility again. And then this is failing because that route doesn't exist yet. That's all good. That's a good thing. Let's see if it works. So if I make a node that's too short. Oh, yeah. And I also forgot to use the return value. So I'm returning the errors, but I have to use them. So now I can get the action data here from the route component props again. So when I submit the form, calls the action returns action data to the component in this nice circle that you saw earlier. You can use this as error message on the input here. Let's see. Like that, errors. And let's do the same for the text area with content. Let's see if it's going to work now. OK, it's working now. So since the validation failed, I can return this from the action, display it in the component. So it's a really nice flow here. I think that's it for the new. Oh, yeah. And then if it's successful, we will do a redirect. There we go, to a 404. So that's the final thing we're going to add, this final route here, the detail route for the node. I'll go back to the routes TS. I'm going to add one more route here, which is going to be using this node ID, because this is a dynamic route. So this is the convention for dynamic routes. Add this. It's just called detail. And I'm also going to add one more thing. So in React Router, we have this thing called resource routes. It can be, I'm also going to do node ID. I'm sorry about this, really annoying. I want to close this. Forgot how. Anyway. Node ID. And then I'm adding another one, so destroy. Let's see if I can get this to be correct. No, it's destroy. Yeah. So a resource route is a route that you add only to, for example, post to. So in this case, we're just going to use it for the delete functionality without putting a component there. And now we have the details. We can actually navigate through these. Let's get one that's a bit better. Right, all working here. And let's see the route module. So detail has a loader getting the node from the params. It has an action, actually, to do a favorite. I'm going to show you this in a sec. And then error boundary, and then the actual component, which is just a display. So here, we're using forms again to do mutations. The favorite is using a fetcher form, which is a special form that doesn't add a history or item to the history stack. And this will now post to the action, so we can do like favorite and not favorite. And finally, the delete is calling this relative route destroy. And it works like this. So actually, that's all of the functionality. But feels good, but that's because my database is pretty fast. What if it wasn't that fast? That's a more realistic. It's realistic that it's not that fast. So let's add also a slow here. So we'll do a slow to the favorite and also to the fetch of the notes. Let's also make the destroy slow. And see now that it's changed. So now it's takes a while, right, before I can see it. And I can feel that it's not so fast anymore. And up until this point, we've been using actually only the server framework part of React Router, just building on web standards. So it's pretty amazing, everything works, but now we want to start enhancing it with just some small parts of the browser framework. So let's see, to make it feel better and give these pending states, optimistic UI, these things. Let's start with the notes here that are a little bit slow. We'll go to the notes list and use the use navigation hook from the browser part of React Router. And if the state is loading, we get this is loading variable. It's being used here to do a pulsing animation around the child route. So you see it's just doing this fade. At least we know something happened, that the content is stale. Let's add one more thing. So this link could actually be a nav link. And a nav link receives some callback props. So you can get and is active and is pending from this nav link. And the pending is also using the browser framework. So now I can actually see the active route, and I get this coloring when it's pending. So I'm able to mark that the network is slow. Let's also fix the, sorry. That's, I'm not the best at CSS, by the way. So also the favorite is still kind of slow here. Let's get to the favorite component. And we're using a fetcher form. Again, it's like this special form that doesn't push to the history stack, and it also gives us like a local form state. So we can just use note is favoriting. It's just use checking the fetcher's form data. If it is favorited, we will know whether the user has clicked it. So we can use this instead to add an optimistic update here. So it's like instantly responding now, right? And finally, for the delete, it's also not the best right now. So here we're just going to add using the navigation, check if the node is deleting, and then we can disable the button. And say if it's deleting, we'll just say something else, right? And now I have pending feedback for that as well. Let's add one more optimistic update, just one more. So here in the new, this is also slow, by the way. This is the last improvement I'm going to make. Let's get the navigation from use navigation. And let's get this optimistic update where I'm just checking the form data of the navigation and returning a fake version of the node display if the validation succeeded, so that it feels like the network is super fast, like that. And what's pretty cool with this is, actually, this is just enhancing the browser framework, server framework. So even if I disable JavaScript here and try to run it, you see it's like slow, but it's working, right? Everything's fine. Just using forms, actions, normal web standard stuff. And we can even get, I think we can even get, oh yeah, I didn't, yeah. Everything's fine. But if I then have JavaScript loaded in the browser, we will have all of these additional features enabled. So we will have the pending states, the optimistic updates, like that, showcasing that we're deleting something. And finally, this one as well. So this is now what we call progressive enhancement, progressively enhancing the server framework features. So we didn't need to use state, didn't need to use useEffect, just using the browser framework of React Router. And this is what makes Remix or React Router so resilient. OK, I think that's it for the demo. Final roundup here. Yeah, so I mentioned in the beginning of this talk that some of the patterns that Remix uses, or React Router uses and Remix invented, have appeared in React 19. And this is some examples of that. So useServer, which is a new React 19 directive, is kind of like React Router actions. And the form component lets you call server functions, kind of like React Router forms calling an action. Use action state can be used to get return value of server functions, kind of like React Router actions returning something. Use optimistic lets you execute optimistic updates, like when React Router checks the navigation or a fetcher to show optimistic UI. Use form status can be used to disable buttons when forms are submitting, just like we do in React Router. So these hooks in 19 are a more composable and component-bound way to do the same things. So it looks like it's been inspired, but of course it's not unique to React Router, but it's definitely using the concepts that React Router started using early on. Another example of that is, or example of the overlap between React Router and React 19. For example, the await component was created for resolving promises and then streaming data with suspense fallbacks. Well, now with React 19 use, we have another way to do the same thing. So what's nice is in React Router v7, it's one of the easiest ways to use React 19, and you can choose the approach that you prefer. You can use the React Router's APIs or the 19 APIs. React Router 7 also just released like an experimental release of server functions and server components. So again, they're letting you pick how you prefer to build your app. So this is the repo for the app that I showed, if you want to use that as a reference. And some other resources. The blog post that explains the history of how Remix became React Router. Upgrade guide, and they have code mods, so it's really easy, by the way. And there's also new docs on React Router website, so there's example reference apps, and then there's also the whole technical explanation that I went through before the demo. It is a bit confusing right now because they're all, some are on the Remix docs, there's something on the v6, v7, but they will probably improve this soon. But it's a bit confusing to navigate right now. And if you want to try this out for yourself, the tutorial is really good. It's kind of using the same ideas that I was showcasing. It's also really fun to build, so I recommend this. And if you're interested in verifying your React skills, maybe, or practicing advanced topics, I'm building a certification about React right now under Certificates Dev Platform. And this certification will allow you to test your skills with coding challenges and questions. And then it also provides training content. So yeah, you can sign up for this if you're interested in that. That's it for the talk. This is my links. Thank you for having me.